Welcome to the Code 4 Couples podcast, focusing on topics for law enforcement officers and couples to keep you and your relationship connected, resilient, and Code 4. Now, your host, law enforcement expert Cyndi Doyle, author of Hold the Line and My Wife.
Hi, guys. Welcome back to Code 4 Couples. It is Cyndi Doyle, your host. And today I have Nick Autry on, who is from Financial Cop. He is very well known in our community for talking about the importance of financial wellness. And I'm very excited to have him on. Nick, thank you so much for being on today with me.
Honored to be here. I've heard a lot of good things about you guys and what you guys are doing out there for the community as well.
Thank you. Yay. Win for me. I hurried up and I put on the record button because Nick and I were already starting to talk. And before I even jump in, I'm going to let y'all know I sound a little tired today because I am. I got back from Hawaii and I'm still a little jet lagged. So I don't think I still have the energy that I normally do, but I definitely wanted to get this done today. Nick is literally up the street and down the street from me, or more like up the street and over west of me, super close. And you were saying before we jumped on that you would never have guessed. How many years ago was it that you officially retired?
I gave up my sergeant stripes. Next week will be 5 years from the Grand Prairie Police Department. And if you had told me that this was going to turn into what it's turned into from a financial wellness perspective, I think we all would have laughed at everybody that said so. It's just been truly become an honor to have become the voice of financial wellness. Sometime this year, we will have taught over 25,000 first responders from over 3,000 agencies nationwide. And we've got about 136 classes in 17 states just this year alone booked. There's actually 4 of us now. There's another full-time financial cop that teaches for me. We've got 2 part-timers that will be full-time next year, whether they like it or not, because we need them. It's just truly become a humbling experience to, again, be the voice out there to help my brothers and sisters with a complicated topic, but a topic that unfortunately so many of us get taken advantage of with as well.
Yeah, totally. I think that there was a disclaimer that Nick needed to make and that I was going to start off. I need to put this out here. He wanted me to say that to let y'all know that Financial Cop is the largest wellness training group in the country, as well as one of the largest law enforcement owned and operated fiduciary only financial planning firms. Does that take care of it, Nick, or is there something more you need to say?
There's one at the end that I need to read as well. I can do it now or I can do it at the end, whichever you want. It's the radio one where you read it as fast as you can, and I don't read it as fast as I can.
Go ahead and do it.
The views expressed in this class are for informational purposes and in no event should be construed as an offer to buy or sell securities. Additionally, this class is not designed to advise you on how to handle anything specific to your finances, nor will listening to my advice guarantee your financial success. The opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and don't take into account your particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs. Neither IFP Advisors, LLC, or IFP Securities doing business as independent financial partners, nor their affiliates or offer tax or legal advice. Interested parties are strongly encouraged to seek advice from a qualified tax and or legal expert regarding the best options for your particular circumstances. Investment advice offered through IFP Advisors doing business as independent financial partners, a registered investment advisor. IFP is not affiliated with Serve and Protect Financial Texas and or Financial Cop.
Okay, then. And all of that is because those are things we don't normally do, but that's because you are like required to do per law.
For SEC rules, because we do investments, even though I'm not going to necessarily give specific investment advice today, but you got to follow those regulations.
Cover all the bases, CYA,
Yep.
all the A's, and I'm
Yep.
good with that. I know that you just said before we did the disclaimer stuff that you had no idea that this was going to be so big as it is now. What's the story? Like, how did this come about? Because I realized that I wanted to know that after I sent my email to you. What was the motivation for this?
Yep. So I got my PhD in money doing a bunch of dumb stuff as a young adult / rookie officer, which qualified me as a rookie officer. I started my career with Grand Prairie in 2003, and I had accumulated a debt load of over $80,000 in consumer debt by my rookie year. 21,000 of that was in one car stereo system. Yes, just one. And I had worked myself into a situation where if I didn't work 20 hours of overtime every pay period or every week, I couldn't pay my bills. And I was just exhausted because I was working overtime like crazy. And if I got injured, I was not going to be able to pay my bills anymore because you can't work overtime when you're on light duty. And so I was very fortunate. I had a beat partner of mine that was that cop that would go car to car with the young officers and pound finances into their heads. He became one of my best friends. And I ended up getting introduced to the Dave Ramsey program, and I fell in love with Dave's debt snowball. And at the time, my girlfriend's title changed to fiance, and I had forgotten to tell her this little bit of information about being $80,000 in debt. And so I had to sit across the table from the girl I wanted to marry and explain to her that the guy she wanted to marry was $80,000 in debt when she was debt free. And I looked at her and I said, don't worry, I got a plan. And she looked at me back and she said, you better. And I said, I'm going to take the principles I learned in this with this debt snowball. And I committed to her that I was going to pay off all $80,000 in debt before we got married.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I spent the next 24 months working about 1,000 hours of overtime. And on March 3rd, 2007, we got married 100% debt free. Everything but the house. And that is when it started. I became the money nerd at Grand Prairie. And fast forward to 2011, Steve Dye became our chief. And he said, develop a curriculum for the academy class. I want you to start teaching our cops about this stuff. And before you knew it, I got asked to teach the whole department. And now in Texas, every sergeant in the North Texas region, whether they go to Caruth or ILEA, has to go through our class. We teach all the leadership command colleges for Lehman. Matter of fact, we're going through the second time right now where all 1,200 chiefs are required to go through this training in Texas. And next thing you know, I started getting asked to teach all across the country. And I love being a cop, but every time I taught my class, I felt like this is what I should be doing. And ultimately, that's why I decided to give up my sergeant stripes, was to dedicate my life to helping my brothers and sisters with these.
I realized you said about ILEA, and I thought, oh, I wonder if my husband went through the class too, because he went through ILEA. So I'm going to have to ask him when I'm off the podcast.
Yep. If he's been through it since 2016, he has.
Yeah, I think he has. Part of it, a huge part of it is a personal story, because that's a lot of it's a big joke almost, that you would see people and they would get cars every couple of years, or somebody would have a boat. In fact, I remember when my husband and I were 5-6 years in, we were hanging out with another cop couple, and they always had toys. They always had ATVs and things like that. And I grew up in a very financially conservative household where I was taught to put every penny away and save. And that was my mindset. And my husband and I would have challenges about that, because he does what I call the big man on campus routine, where I've got this whole entire check that's $500. And I'm like, that is not in our budget, but it's very much like that. But I remember being really envious of this couple that had these ATVs that they were driving. And I'm thinking, I want ATVs, I want toys, I want boats. And it was really hard not to do that. But I know, like a joke in our community about people buying the toys. Is there something what do you think leads to all those spending patterns?
I call it the FTO starter pack. When we get out of training, we do a lot of things. Big fat truck, we lift it and we get a tattoo, we get a rifle, we date a nurse, a teacher, or a dispatcher usually, and then we're broke. And the biggest thing, one of the things I'm stressing heavily to my chiefs right now is it's very similar to me. Before I was a cop, I sold senior trips to high school kids for Cancun, and I started making $48,000 a year plus commission at the age of 19 in 1999. I made a crap load of money. I came from a very humble family. We worked their butts off to make sure we could have the lifestyle we did, but we didn't exactly live a life of luxury. What happens when you hand a kid that comes from that kind of a family that kind of money? We start doing stupid stuff with money. I don't tell my personal story to brag that I was making $48,000 a year back then. I tell that story to illustrate a point. What do we do to our cops now? We hire these kids at 23, 24 years of age. We pay them more money than they've ever made in their entire life. We give them access to unlimited overtime. And what do you think they're going to do? They're going to go spend a bunch of money, because we don't train our young officers, our high school kids, how to deal with money. The toys start coming out, the marketing of debt kicks in, and we think, I can do this. And that's what leads to a lot of marriage problems. We have one of the highest divorce rates in America when it comes to our profession. And it's a recipe for disaster.
I think part of it too, I don't know if you find this, I always think of the psychological aspect too, of that our officers' brains, first responders' brains are trained to get hits like that, those hits of oxytocin or the cortisol. At least my take on it too is the idea of, oh, it's exciting to buy things and people get addicted to it. I haven't been immune to going and spending money because I had something to do and going shopping. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to go return these things now. But I think that's a part of it too, don't you?
It is. It correlates. Most of us are familiar with Dr. Kevin Gilmartin's Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement. And he talks about the hypervigilant state where we go through these peaks of adrenaline and then we take these dumps down in depression and we get off work and we're stuck in a depressed mode. And what should we do to get out of that depressed mode? We should work out. We should hang out with family. We should get hobbies, those kinds of things. But what do a lot of us do? We turn to addiction. We zone out. But he talks in his class about retail therapy. Why? Because I don't know about you, but if I've had a bad week, if I go buy a $70,000 truck, that's going to feel pretty good till those payments start hitting. And psychologically, we needed something to boost our adrenaline back up when we didn't think about the domino effects of what that causes down the road from a financial perspective.
Yeah, totally. And it also leads to what you had talked about, that overtime trap. And I've done a previous podcast on that, talking about that trap of overtime. But that's what you were saying is like you weren't going to make it unless you were doing 20 hours of overtime.
Yep.
Was that a month or a week?
That was 20 every week.
Oh my gosh, you must have been exhausted, which doesn't bode well for policing either.
My rock bottom was I got home one night, it was midnight. I was exhausted, not because I'd worked my shift in patrol, but because I'd worked my 5 hours of overtime before I started my shift. And I knew I had to do it the next day again. And that was the night I walked over to my kitchen table and added everything up and realized that I was $80,000 in debt. And one of my favorite classes, I go back and teach my academy class, and I got to do that at Grand Prairie this last Wednesday. And we were joking, there was a veteran in the class, and I joked and said they should have named Beltline in Maine the Nick Autry lane. And the veteran in the back was like, yep, because I lived there working overtime traffic enforcement almost every day.
Wow. It's a lot. What are some of the traps and pitfalls that we wind up falling into?
Yep. The biggest trap is failing to plan. Everything that we do in our lives, especially for my first responders, is a plan. They get to work and the first thing they do every day is they plan lunch. That's the number one priority. But the reality is that they also plan their calls out. We do the what if scenarios. This happens, that happens, etc. But then we get home and we zone out and we fail to plan for our personal life. And I'll give the analogy. How much time and energy did you put into planning your vacation? A lot, right? Now correlate that. How much time and energy did you put into planning your budget this month? Was it even close? And the reality is that if we start to dedicate more time to planning towards our budget, guess what you ultimately get to take more of? Vacations. We've got to get into a better habit of planning our future, looking at our goals and communicating with our spouse about money. We talk about the number one skill in wealth building, no matter what. Everybody always wants to talk about investments first. It's the last thing we talk about. The number one thing that we need to address to master becoming wealthy in retirement is budgeting. That dreaded B word. Everything revolves around it. And people think a budget constricts, but it really doesn't. A well-written budget actually opens the door to spend more without guilt. Failing to plan is my number one pitfall that we fall into as a first responder. For my married folks, we have a lot of pitfalls. One of the biggest pitfalls I see for my first responders is separate accounts. And I always tell people, I'm not going to tell you how to run your finances, but I'm going to tell you how we run ours. We have one joint account in my family. Every paycheck goes in, every bill goes out. Why? Transparency. It's especially important if you have a stay-at-home in the family. For my first responders out there, you want to stop money fights in America. She's not an assistant chief. She's the chief. You are co-chiefs in this family. We work together with this. If one of you makes 40 a year and the other one makes 60, and we don't take advantage of the fact that we make $100,000 in combined income, that's a big difference when it comes to money. Ironically, in the largest study of millionaires ever conducted, 11,000 millionaires were surveyed. A third of those 11,000 millionaires surveyed responded having never earned more than $100,000 in any given 1 year of their entire life. And one of the number one characteristic of millionaire couples, they earn it together, they spend it together, they plan it together. Everything is done together. They constantly talk about money. And that's one of the biggest pitfalls in marriages.
Let me jump on that too, because as somebody who works with couples in the therapy room and I see what gets in the way. And I am going to just totally agree with that statement, because what I see as far as couples and arguments of money, almost every single one of them are arguing about money, have joint different accounts. They have 3 or 4 different accounts, and it's okay, I only contribute X number of percentage because I make X amount of money. And so the resentment of, oh, I'm over here and I get to go have my toys and do everything else, or we've split the bills. I'm doing air quotes right there because I actually have a couple that is arguing about that right now. We've split the bills, but when they look at what the bills actually are, it's, oh, one's paying more than the other. And now they're arguing, but this was the agreement we came to. And it really is exactly that, that they're not leveraging not only trust, commitment, transparency. You nailed it, in the sense that they're not leveraging their own power as far as freedom and playtime by doing exactly that. So I just needed to jump on right there, because what he's saying, Nick, what you were saying is exactly right. That idea of having yours, mine's, and ours, as opposed to just one, is so critical for couples.
March will be 16 years of marriage for me and Carrie. And I talk about how we have in 16 years of marriage, almost, we have never had a fight about money, not one. And it's not because we're perfect. It's not because we're well off. It's just that when we got married, we made it a priority. We constantly talk about money. We have checks and balances. And we talk about that from a perspective of, we have my monthly budget meeting, and I say mine because I'm the nerd. Carrie's my free spirit. She hates the B word with a passion. It's cool. She comes to the budget meeting to satisfy me so that I can say, hey, she came to the budget meeting. You don't have to absorb, you have to listen, because if I'm not here tomorrow, you need to be able to know what's going on. And we have a rule in our joint account. If one of us wants to go buy anything over a certain dollar amount that we both agree upon, we must call each other and talk about it. Yes, guys, that means call your wife and ask for permission. And, I'm the spender in my family. She's the saver. She never calls me because it's always me wanting to buy something. Now, we are adults. We do need some autonomy. And we have what we call an allowance account. We both get a monthly allowance that we both agree upon. That's the exact same amount. It goes into a separate checking account. And there's 2 purposes for that allowance account. The first is if I want to go buy her a gift, she doesn't know how much I'm spending on her. The second, we give each other more than we're going to spend on gifts. It grows over time. So if I want to go buy me a toy out of my allowance account, she can't say anything at all. And my favorite story with this is my wife has a rule for me. It's called no more guns. And I don't have a lot of guns, but she's, you don't need any more guns. And I remember my son was 7 at the time when this happened. And at 7, your kids are at that age where when you tell him, don't tell mommy, what does that mean?
He tells mommy.
Correct. Me and Zach were out shopping one day, and we got home and we walked into the kitchen, and Carrie goes, where you 2 boys been all day? And the first words out of that little turd's mouth was, Daddy bought a gun. And of course, Carrie started to give me the look, and I put my hand up, and I don't know why that's just become our universal sign. And her entire demeanor changed. And she looked at me and she goes, allowance? I said, yes, ma'am. She goes, oh, cool. What kind of guns you get? And
wow, that's awesome.
2 things occurred. 1, we didn't have a fight. And 2, my 7-year-old son got to watch us and how we communicate about money. So we're teaching him those strategies for when he has a spouse later on.
Yeah, that's awesome, because I think it's important to have that freedom where it's not like I've got to get permission all the time. But you've made some really good points that it's not, it could be gifts, it could be you saving, like it's your own little savings account to go play. And it gives autonomy. At the same time, there's transparency as far as what's going on. That's awesome. And I know I interrupted you. Were there any other traps that we fall into as law enforcement couples?
Overtime and part-time jobs to pay the monthly bills. It's a love-hate relationship. It's a hate relationship because so many of us get into a trap where we rely on overtime. But the beauty about financial wellness is we have something that the civilian population doesn't. We have overtime, and it's transitioning overtime from a position where you're using it to elevate your standard of living to a position where you're using it to build your financial strength. And my first year in law enforcement, I didn't work overtime. I was in the academy. I had training. We just don't work overtime that first year. Years 2 and 3, I worked 1,000 hours of overtime to become debt free. Years 4 through 9, I worked an additional 3,500 hours of overtime. Yeah.
Wow. He saw me roll my eyes
Yeah.
or go big on my eyes. You didn't see that, but yeah.
And
like,
I get
that's
asked
a lot.
I get asked all the time, why? At the time, my wife was working during the day. I was on evening shift for a lot of that. I'm a bit of a workaholic. So I might as well go in and do something. I kept working overtime. And I remember one year on Grand Prairie, we have unlimited step. We don't have to, instead of the tech step, we get it through the city. And I remember one year they were underfunded for that. And an email came out to the department that said, you can only work 5 hours of overtime per pay period till October. And it was June.
Ooh.
And I remember sitting in briefing and looking at some of the faces of the ghost in their faces. And I got called in the assistant chief's office because I was one of the top overtime earners at the time. And he goes, Nick, are you going to be okay? You work a lot of overtime. And I said, sir, with all due respect, thank you for the vacation. And he goes, what? You can imagine that wasn't the conversation
Right.
he'd been having all day. And I said, sir, you know how you approve those vacation leaves for me every year? Step paid for that. I'm like, you remember a couple of years ago, me and Carrie bought our first house and we needed to furnish it. Guess what paid for the furniture? Step did, overtime did. I did my 5 hours of overtime until November or October. And then I went back to my normal routine. And in my first 9 years of career, I worked 4,500 hours of overtime. And on November 1st of 2011, I quit working overtime cold turkey because Zach was born.
Oh.
And that was my rule for Carrie, is the minute we had kids, I was done cold turkey. I could have paid my house off years ago, but I couldn't have been the baseball coach. And
Right.
that's the beauty of our job, is that we can work overtime for the extras, but still do it in a manner that allows us to honor the number one priority in our lives, which is our family. We can use it to accelerate our finances. We can use it to do things for our kids, but most importantly, we can make sure that we're there for our family.
Yeah. I have, you're talking about that, about your son, and I got tears in my eyes because I think about one of my goals is exactly what you just said, is that officers and as families, we don't recognize the importance of spending time together, and money gets in the way. Spending gets in the way of creating the life that we want and need to create. And we make that the goal, the money, the goal, that we have to afford that great vacation or give or buy gifts or keep up with the Joneses, or however you want to say that. Right.
Yep.
And it becomes it's a struggle with scarcity. Sometimes it's a struggle to go, you know what, I'm going to commit to this on a different level, because you see people doing other things all the time. And to make the sacrifice to say, no, what's important is time with my family and not that next toy or that next financial hurdle that I want to overcome, or how do I make more money because my brother-in-law or sister-in-law makes $200,000 a year and I make 65.
Yep.
That gets in the way too.
And you want to talk about, if you don't mind, I got an email from a cop that I taught last year or earlier this year.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about the impact this has. The email read, says, good morning. I pray all is well. I don't know if you remember me, but I work with and I'm not going to say the police department. You guys did a seminar at our department training earlier this year in service. I reached out to you about coming out of debt. My mom passed away and stuff had started to happen that forced me to take out loans, etc. You sent me a Dave Ramsey book out of the kindness of your heart. And over the last 6 months, I've worked 237 hours of off duty and overtime to pay everything off. And I am now debt free with the exception of my home, my car, my student loan. And it's the last paragraph that hits home the most. Thank you as I fight back tears. I now have the time and freedom to spend with my daughter. If I work overtime or off duty, it's because I want to, not because I have to.
God. And that's the difference that you're making. That's the difference. That's the difference that you can make in your family if you as a couple or you independently decides to take control of this. That it's not about getting on that overtime trap and getting on that treadmill of overtime and working. It's about creating time and freedom. I read an article recently and I cannot remember, I've got to go find it, but it was talking about what do people want more of? And it's always freedom. And what does that look like? And are we willing to do what we need to do to get it? All of these aspects lead us to being financially sick. I know you've talked about already some ideas of how to get more financially well, which is have conversations. It's get the debt paid down. You've talked about that snowball that Dave Ramsey has talked about. What are other ways? Oh, budget meeting. You mentioned the budget meeting with your wife. What are some of the ways that we can take? What are some small steps
Yep.
to get to being more financially healthy or well?
Yep. I call my plan the 8 phases of financial training. How do you start to win with money? And I call it the phases of training because every cop and firefighter in America goes through field training. And you don't go from phase 1 to phase 4. You go through each step. And just like life happens in training, sometimes we struggle and we go to remedial training. And we master remedial and we go right back to that phase of training. And that's what the 8 phases are about. And so when I talk about the 8 phases, phase 1 of training is your budget. Nothing happens in a financial plan without a budget. We've got to understand, when I talk about budget, I call a budget a SWAT raid. For my cops, a budget is doing an ops plan before the month begins. It's debriefing throughout the month, and it's doing an after action plan at the end of every month. That's as simple of a budget as it gets. We all know what SWAT teams do with that. And phase 2 of training is your initial baby emergency fund. I like to tell people, I want you to save $2,000 as fast as you can so that you can use it if there's a flat tire on your car instead of going and using credit cards. So I always tell people, for us, this is where we talk about it. It's a luxury for us in law enforcement. We can go work overtime in a month and make $2,000 sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's we get to accelerate this versus the civilian population. They have to go get another job.
Yeah.
So phase 3 is the most difficult. It's the debt snowball, listing your debts from smallest to largest and paying your debt off. And I tell people all the time, it's really hard to lose weight in America with a tub of ice cream in the freezer. Because if you're like me, it's really hard to become debt free if you can't stop using your credit cards. I don't mind you using credit cards in the future as long as you're responsible with them. But when we're trying to get out of debt, we got to get rid of them. I also tell people it's hard to lose weight in America because you work your butt off and you lose a couple pounds and you look in the mirror and you don't really see the weights come off. That's the beauty of the debt snowball, is psychologically, if you pay that smallest debt off first, which is usually a small debt, you've just had a victory. I had my debt snowball taped to my refrigerator. And every time I'd pay off a debt, I'd walk up with a big black Sharpie marker and put a big old black line through it. You had a win. You roll that payment into the next one, pay that off, you roll it. And every debt you pay off, you become that much more financially stable because you've eliminated that payment. Phase 4 is to fully fund the emergency fund. Save 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses. I like 6 versus 3. And that way, if Murphy knocks on your door, you've got a financial emergency, you no longer have emergencies. You have speed bumps, you have inconveniences. I always tell people, think back to the last time you had a financial emergency. Was it the event that caused the stress, or was trying to pay for it that caused the stress? It's usually the latter.
It's always about paying for it. Yeah.
Yep. In the first 4 phases of training are intense. You've got to sacrifice. We're not eating out. We're not going on vacations, those kinds of things. Once you get done, you're fully funded with an emergency fund and you're consumer debt free. It's time to have some fun. I tell people all the time, if you want to go spend $150 on a steak and lobster at Del Frisco's, have at it. You've earned that right to start to live like no one else. Phase 5 is retire like nobody else. 15 to 20% of your gross income into retirement accounts. Subtract your pension out, and whatever you have left over needs to go into some kind of a retirement account, whether it's your city deferred comp account, 401ks, Roth IRAs. There's all kinds of mediums out there. Phase 6 is save and invest for big purchases. If you got kids, you need to start saving for college. You want to buy a Corvette? How are we going to save for that Corvette to make sure it doesn't cause us to go back down in our phases? And that reminds me, if something happens, let's say you're in the middle of your debt snowball phase and the water heater goes out, that's called remedial training. You go into remedial, you take care of the water heater, and then you go right back into phase 4. Phase 7 is pay off the house. Throw every extra dollar you can at paying off the house. And phase 8 is released from training. You've made it. I want you to build wealth like crazy and have the fun that you deserve to have because you can become wealthy now, but do so in a manner that you don't lose your humbleness. My favorite Dave Ramsey quote is, if you live like no one else, later on in life, you get to give no one else. I've had more fun building wealth and doing the things money can do for my family than I could have ever imagined. But the greatest fun I've ever had in my entire life was taking the wealth that we've built and write checks to organizations that I never dreamed I could write checks to, because you can.
Yeah.
Give no one else. And that's it. It really is as simple as 8 simple phases of financial training.
It seems like if people can get through that snowball, it gets a little easier, but it's getting through that snowball and having that tenacity to buckle down and to do that. And that is probably, I'm going to guess, where people struggle the most, is getting through that.
And that's crazy for me in law enforcement, because what that means is we are struggling with discipline. And every training class we go to revolves around what? Discipline.
Yeah.
Trigger discipline at the range, use of force discipline, everything's discipline. But then it's like money, it's no, ain't got no discipline here no more.
I was just thinking, I think part of that too is maybe being told what to do. I think people have a bad taste in their mouth when it comes to budget, or a bad taste in their mouth when it comes to knuckling down and doing that snowball. I think it comes down to, what's the purpose? What's the purpose of doing this? And making sure that you have purpose, for a reason for doing that. What do you find? What kind of purposes do people have of getting out of debt? I know for us, it's the stress of not having to worry. And once I didn't have to worry, there's still, and I have to admit, sometimes where I'm like, I don't know, I think maybe we overspent this month or something like that, because we're not perfect, but there is still that ability to feel like, oh my gosh, I don't have to stress out about this. It's not always in the back of my mind, because when I was younger, and I know when we first got married too, both of us had credit card debt. We came in the creditors calling. I'm just thinking back of like the trauma involved with that. But there's a lot that goes on. I know for us, it was the purpose of just having that freedom to not to spend whatever we wanted to do, but just the freedom of not having to feel like we were under it all.
A budget will actually open doors. It doesn't shut them. People think a budget constricts you. It actually opens the door to spend more. A budget's not about telling you can't spend money. It's about telling you where you are spending your money. I give a good example in the sense of, let's say that you budget $600 for restaurants for this month, and we end up a week away from the end of the month and you've only spent $400. We've got a choice. We can take that $200 and we can use it somewhere else, or we can take that $200 and go spend $100 on a steak and lobster dinner this weekend. There's no guilt. You budgeted $600. Don't feel guilty about that. And you get the choice of that now. Same thing with the choice. I talk about budgets a lot because it's my number one topic. The problem with that from the guilt perspective is a lot of time we as a couple will take that guilt of spending money, and we won't spend money because we're afraid we're going to make the other spouse mad, or the other spouse does get mad and it becomes a confrontation. Knowing your strengths and weaknesses. Carrie is my free spirit, but she's my saver. I'm the nerd. I like everything to be in order. I also am the natural spender. Let's talk about Amazon from a budget perspective. Amazon can be anything. It can be clothes for the kids. It can be dog food. It can be groceries. Who knows what's in the Amazon box? One of my favorite classes we go through in law enforcement is called verbal judo. Your mouth will talk you out of more fights than your fist will. We get this phenomenal training. Why are we not using our verbal judo at home? If I see that Carrie bought a bunch of stuff on Amazon and I walk into the living room that night and I'm like, hey, what'd you get on Amazon? She's already on her heels. What do you mean what I buy on Amazon? I'm an adult. I'll buy whatever I want to buy on Amazon. But if I use my verbal judo skills instead, and I go in and say, hey, Carrie, I saw you got some stuff at Amazon. Which category in the budget do you want me to put it in? Now she knows that I'm just trying to satisfy my nerdiness. And hey, I got some clothes for the kids. Okay, cool. I'll go put it in the clothing budget. There's no guilt that she bought it now. It's just, hey, Nick wants to know where to put it to make sure it's accounted for. If I go back to the budget and we said we were going to spend $150 on clothes for the kids and she just dropped $200, I don't walk back into that living room and go, what the heck is wrong with you? We said $150. What are you spending $200 for? I might as well get my gloves on. The fight's on at that point.
Yeah.
Instead, I walk in and again, I use my verbal judo skills and I say, hey, Carrie, What we thought we were going to spend on clothes this month was about $150. We're sitting at about 200. Can you come help me balance this? Do we want to pull $50 out of restaurants? Do we want to pull it somewhere else? By the way, what happened? Zach outgrow his clothes again or something like that? Again, now it's not a fight. And there's a key word I said there multiple times. We made those kids together. We raised them together. We earn the money together. We plan it. I'm not mad she went over budget, but we do have something we've got to solve as a couple now. And let's go work through it together.
Yeah, and balancing it out and using money as a tool. I want to go to those last steps that you talked about. I talked about it'd be hard to get through it. And then you're talking about, you said one of the, I don't know if you said gifts, but the joy that you had was giving financial gifts. And when I think of that, I talk about Gottman's house, and it's the sound relationship house. And the big part of it up at the top is making life dreams come true. What is it that you want to do in your relationship? What is the legacy that you want to leave behind? And when you're talking about those last couple steps, you're talking about how, like, retirement, but you're also talking about legacy that you're leaving behind. And what's it like? How do you get people motivated? What do you tell them? How do you help them see the legacy that they can leave behind if they just understand how to maximize this tool that we call money?
Yep. Interesting statistic. I start my class out with a question. How many of us in this room got into this profession to become millionaires? And of course, everybody stares at me, or I get funny, crude cop jokes. And the weird thing is that I work with over 15 millionaires right now, and almost every single one of them is a sergeant or line level officer. They're the line level folks. They're the little guys, because they found the discipline they needed to be able to do it. And most of us, unless we work in a pretty rural area, most of us make really good money in law enforcement. And so the legacy becomes that you can win with money. You can become wealthy with that discipline. You can do things for yourself, your family, your kids you never dreamed about. But ultimately, if you follow those 8 phases the right way, you're going to look up one day and go, hopefully the greed doesn't kick in. When is enough? Again, because we all come from humble beginnings. And so why not start to become more charitable? Why not start to help our brothers and sisters out? If you can win with money and you can start to build wealth, imagine the legacy you can leave, whether it's public or anonymously, to help your brothers and sisters. And I'm going to give a shout out to one of the organizations that we donate to the most, Saving a Hero's Place. This is a retired San Antonio cop, or he didn't retire. He left early so that he could dedicate his life to building honor chairs for our brothers and sisters, 100% free. And he doesn't charge the department anything. It's a complete nonprofit. Think about that legacy from a thin blue line perspective of, you've done so well in your life. How many honor chairs can you help build for your brothers and sisters to honor their legacy for giving the ultimate sacrifice? And so there's just things like that you find that you start to become passionate about an organization, and you start to pour money into them because you can.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. The idea of just being able to pour back into in a different way. And the fact that this is something that you can do as a individual, as a couple, but it's really important as a couple that you have those goals. And sitting down, talking about budgets, sitting down to figure out what's important to get over that snowball, and then going forward to figure out the life that you want to live and the legacy that you want to leave behind.
Yep.
That is awesome. Nick, if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yep. So our website is financialcop.com. It's the easiest way to get a hold of us. There's all kinds of resources on there. There's blogs that we write. There's free legacy go bag worksheets for end of life planning. And so there's all kinds of ways and resources you can use on there, but that's the best way is through financialcop.com, or you can email me directly at nick@financialcop.com.
And y'all go check out his website. I was on the website and I did not have time to dig into everything that is on this website. I wish I would have found this 5 years into our career, but it didn't exist. Yep. He wasn't there yet. There's so much good information. And if you want to be a millionaire in this field, I think Nick is the guy to do it. He has all kinds of services as a part of Financial Cop. And like I said, just tons of resources. If they don't, is there a workshop that people can go to on the website, or is that only through an on-site department? Do they need to bring you in? How do they access the workshops?
Either or. So a lot of departments will bring us in and do in-service training for them, or we go to conferences and those kinds of things. On the website, if you'll click on the financial wellness page, we do have our virtual Financial Cop Academy, where it's our 4-hour class we teach in person that you can go through on that as well. And it's a little different in that it's not your normal class where you just go through it and you're done. Once you purchase that, you actually get access to repeat the class as many times as you want to for a full 12 months.
Very cool. I'm going to really encourage y'all to go to this site. It's financialcop.com. Nick, thank you so much for being on. Did we cover all the disclaimers, or do we need to say anything else?
Compliance will let me know if we didn't. They're going to laugh when they hear that part too.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. And until next time, guys, keep it Code 4.
Thanks for joining us. For more information about the podcast or Cyndi, check out code4couples.com. All intellectual property rights owned by CRLD2 Ventures, LLC, are protected by the firm of 9mm, 45 ACP, 5.56mm, and 12 gauge.